we had like 8 speakers on our boat that came off of a repair ship, and they wired them in for us. And we would go through villages early in the morning, playing Whole Lot of Love by Led Zeppelin as loud as we could off of an 8-track um, player. We had the old 8 tracks, and that's what they didn't really want us doing that, but we
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
did what we wanted to
Yeah.
do. And the way we looked at it, where we were, there were no real rules. We just were told, do your job, and then we were all maybe a little crazy. My boat crew was probably the younger boat crew of the group because we didn't have a real sailor on our boat. Most of them had, I call a real sailor that had been in for a while. I was in charge, and I'd only been in 3 years when I went over there. We kind of mutinied against our boat captain because we all thought he was a little crazy. And we worried about him getting us killed because we just didn't like him. So we kind of ran him off. And then they said somebody has to be boat captain, and they all just pointed at me. We had a couple different commanding officers depending on where you were in the Mekong. Um, but toward the end, we had a lieutenant that just said, "Do your job." Earlier in the time frame, we had a lieutenant that was in charge of us that, well, I can't say nobody, but most people just didn't like at all. And because of his attitude, um, I mean, that man was the lieutenant I had when I found out that my wife had had my son. And I disliked him so much that I couldn't even smile when he told me. I just walked away from him and then did like cartwheels across the boats after I got away from him.
Let me ask you then, I've noticed this with vets. I mean, decades later, in some cases, vets will look back on certain leaders they had, senior enlisteds, officers, and just talk about what excellent leaders they were. In other cases, decades later, vets are looking back and saying that guy was terrible. And that feeling persists, for decades. What was it that made him such a bad leader?
I think it was his attitude toward us. It was, I mean, he was, I guess, a true officer. Um, he thought he was better than all of us because he was an officer, and we thought we should just be kind of left alone to do our job. Um, I said he didn't treat everybody very well, and you talk about it and you say, you couldn't have done much worse to me than send me to the Mekong Delta on those little gunboats on those streams that were no wider than an interstate, or even narrower. And then his attitude toward us, he talked down to all of us, and that didn't go over well. Where the second lieutenant we had, um, he was more like equal to us and just would tell us, please do your job. And he just went about his business, which made it easier on him, we thought, because we knew what we had to do.
The second lieutenant, he tells you just do your job. And so you're on a tango boat, if I understand correctly. And so what does that mean? What is the job of a tango boat?
Well, almost every night, we did have a few nights off. We would head out on patrol at about 4 in the afternoon or 5, depending on how far we had to go to get to our location. And then our job was actually to just stop movement uh, down the stream in our area and across the stream where they might be bringing supplies to the Viet Cong. And so we had to stop that. And the rules were kind of, anybody that was out at night was a bad guy. And it was just one of those. If they're out at night and they're a bad guy, you're supposed to shoot them. Now, I was a true city kid. I never fired a weapon until training for Vietnam.
Yeah.
Um, didn't like firing weapons. And to this day, I don't have guns in my house. I'm just not a gun person. And I joke and say maybe being a boat captain was the best job I could have because I could read maps and I could run a boat and I could get us there and I could get us back. But if it came to me being able to hit a target, I wouldn't have been good. So I had a boat crew that had very accurate shooters, a lot of Southern guys that knew how to shoot. And then, so our job at night, what we would do is we would tie off to a tree limb or something. We would loop a line around it, and you would actually tie a slip knot to the front of the boat. So if you had to start the engines and back up, you could just pull back and the knot would come undone. But mostly it was just stop any movement in the area. If you had movement, you would call it in, but you didn't always have to get permission to shoot. If you thought you were in danger, you shot. And then in the morning, and then we'd turn around and go back in the morning. So we would spend, could be 14 or 15 hours out counting, getting to our location every day almost. Some locations were safer than others. And if you had a safer location, you could let like half your boat crew go to sleep and say three people would stay up and until a certain hour and then you would rotate. So you had somebody, like I had somebody that was like second in charge, but we didn't, call it that. But if it was a more dangerous area, everybody would stay up because you would need that because at any moment you could be in the middle of a big firefight. So everybody stayed up in rough areas.
Let's say just a standard mission, if there, if there was such a thing, you come across a sampan, you see a sampan, let's say it's, 7:30 at night, so it's dark, but it's not late at night. Do you, are you, given the context, can you just open up on them? Do you stop and search them? What are you going to do with that sampan if you come across it at 8 o'clock at night?
Well, if it's dark, the odds are you're going to shoot it because you couldn't be sure. If it was still daylight, depending on the time, if it was daylight, we would stop it and check it, and you would flip everything over. Somebody would get on the sampan or the boat. Some of them were bigger, and you would check everything because they might have weapons in there. They could have anything. But if it was still daylight and they didn't have anything, any contraband, you let them go. You let them going down the stream. But at night, the rules were you shot them. And I mean, that was kind of the way it went. And it sounds kind of cold. At the very beginning, it really bothered me. But later, you get cold to it. I mean, they were trying to shoot us. We were trying to shoot them. And like I said, being a city kid, I didn't love it, but it was the way of the deal, and it was a war. You had to shoot them before they shot you.
Yeah. Now, where you are you dealing overwhelmingly or only with Viet Cong, or do you have some NVA mixed in as well?
We had There might have been some NVA, but we had Viet Cong, where down in the Delta, far south was Viet Cong. Mostly, and we were in an area where called there for quite a while called the U Minh Forest, which is way south in Vietnam. And the French dropped their best paratrooper battalion in there when they were fighting them, and never heard from any of them ever again. So they were dug in underground for years before we got there. But then it was our job to try and control that area. And it was tough because but we had so much firepower on our boat. Um, they got to a point where they were kind of afraid of us, I think. I mean, we had a lot of firefights, but they were kind of afraid of us with our firepower coming off our boat. And we had two 20 millimeter cannons on our boat, one on each side. They used to shoot airplanes down with them in World War II, and we were shooting people with them. So, and then we had a grenade launcher on the back that was electrical fire, and it was like they were grenades were belted together and it just fed through like a machine gun, and it'd fire like 200 grenades a minute, and it was just really powerful. And that was just the big guns. We had 50 caliber machine guns, 30 caliber machine guns, all kinds of rifles, shotguns, you name it. We had firepower, and only having 6 people on the boat, we you could just shoot one gun till it stopped and move on to the next one.
So you're pretty confident if you get into a firefight with the Viet Cong that, the firepower of the boat you're on, plus the training is going to be able to overcome whatever the Viet Cong can throw at you, certainly most of the time anyway. But did you ever have the feeling that that the area you're in really ever could be controlled? Do you see what I'm saying? Is it one of those situations where you win pretty much every fight, but the war itself can't be won?
Yes, yes, just cut and dried. Yes. I mean, at the beginning, I was kind of gung ho because I joined the Navy, but when I was over there, at first you think we can do this. Now, later, there was you could win all the battles, but you weren't going to win the war. My outlook to this day is that if they would have let the U.S. troops, really want to win that war, it would have been over before I got there in 1969. But my outlook was we weren't given, because if you hear somebody say we lost the war, I mean, that aggravates us Vietnam vets. But I always thought we didn't lose the war. We weren't given the opportunity to win, is the way I looked at it.
Now, what is it that leads you to that conclusion? It sounds like, this the idea that you have one hand tied behind your back or rules of engagement, what is it that leads you to that conclusion?
Well, when we were first there, the way they explained it to us was it was like they were trying to tone down the war, and that was 69, didn't end till 75. So tone down the war. So um, don't don't shoot first. Let them engage you, and then you engage. But and most of the boat captains, I swear, most of the boat captains would just say, "Okay." But I was younger, and I said, "I got a question. Um, what if they shoot straight? You're going to let them shoot at me before I can shoot at them. If I see rustling in the bushes, I want to shoot that. I don't want them shooting at me." I mean, they had rockets that would B-40 rockets, they were called. They would hit our boat, explode, and then burn through steel and throw shrapnel. And you're thinking, boy, and I'd rather shoot first. And so they told us if you consider yourself in dire danger, you can fire first. And I went back to my crew and said, consider yourself in dire danger all the time. If the bush is blowing the breeze, shoot it. I joined the Navy thinking I didn't want to get drafted and run through the rice paddies. So I said, I'm going to join the Navy. And if I go to Vietnam, I'll be on a ship 2 miles off the coast. I wasn't on a ship 2 miles off the coast. It was in the rice paddies with the army that was running around over there.
Yeah.
But and the thing is, I was never on a ship. I was in the Navy 4 years, and I've never been on a ship. I was shore duty for 3 years in Southern California, leading a pretty good life during Vietnam. And then the fourth year, they sent me to Vietnam. And I guess it was because they needed somebody who could handle a small boat, because I was on a harbor tugboat for 2 years, and everything small, no ship. It was hot and dirty and just nasty, and they just threw us onto a bus and taken us to what they call the Annapolis Hotel, where all the Navy guys went the first time and checked in and all. And right the first day or the second day, they blew the front off the Annapolis Hotel, some satchel charges, and I just happened, they had run out of beds, and I happened to be back at Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base. I was scared. I mean, admittedly, I was really scared, and I kept thinking they could just shoot you at any time, And but in my mind, though, I was thinking, we're going to get them. We're going to get them. And then, like I said, a little ways in, no, we're not. They're not going to let us. And it's just nothing like I expected, you know.
So I was going to ask you, what's the first thing you experienced that drove home to the fact that you're in a war zone? I'm assuming that it's the sapper who hits the Annapolis Hotel and your first day in
That, yeah, that, I mean, not being there wasn't quite the same. I think what really did it was on the Tango boat, the first time we had a firefight and they were shooting at us. Now, granted, on that first boat, I was like kind of down in a hole, um, handling the boat and running it. So I think maybe I was safer than a lot of them, because they had big flaps that would close around there and little slits you look through. So maybe I was safer. But the first time we really got hit, that did it. I realized these people are trying to kill me, and it was just boom. They're trying to shoot me, and I go, that's this isn't good.
Can you walk us through this first firefight, sort of how it unfolded?
It was, there was no, I always said there was no real reasoning to exactly, I guess they just wanted to sink a boat, or if they could, or whatever. But to sink our boat, you'd have had to put a mine in the water probably. I mean, because these boats were heavy, flat bottomed, and like I said, had so much firepower and armament on them. And you would just get hit out of nowhere. I mean, a lot of times you would just be going down a stream, and sometimes during the day, but mostly at night. And they would just um, start shooting at you with the rockets and whatever. And then most of the time, it would only go on for a short period of time. And then it would just stop. And it was like they were never there and they were gone. They might have gone underground or whatever. I mean, we might be shooting, but we might be shooting at nothing, because if they went underground, we couldn't get them. They're
Yeah.
just, like I said, they'd been dug in for so long, and they were so good at their jobs and all. And but it would like hit, gone. And you would like, where'd that come from? Kind of.
And is it sort of, the boats going through a canal or, through a river, through a tributary or something, you get hit, firefight, 2 or 3 minutes, done, and then you just keep on going? Is that kind
That's it. And then you would keep going to wherever you were going. I mean, it was just like, it was, I guess it wasn't, it was kind of like, well, it was just an inconvenience. They shot at you and slowed you down. As long as everybody, you know, when I got to be in charge, it was just, I would be just yelling to everybody okay? Everybody okay? And you, yep, yeah, everybody's okay. And then you would go on and go do your job wherever you were going to go, and
do these missions involve bringing troops or supplies to places?
we when we got there, the Ninth Infantry Army that was there in the Delta rode on these boats, the Tango boats, all the time. Tango boats would take them out and drop them off. When I got there, the Ninth Infantry had not gone home yet. They were getting close to going home, but they weren't riding on the boats any longer. So I never carried any Ninth Infantry. I carried a few times, I carried the South Vietnamese, you know, them just a couple times, not often. Occasionally, you know, maybe a SEAL team, but they got their own boats and they rode
Right.
their own boats. But it was we didn't carry a lot of troops. We didn't carry a lot of troops, or we didn't carry supplies for anybody. Our job was just to control an area and not let like a little army base or something get overrun if they were in the area. We were rarely in what I would say is a town. Um, Little villages would be close to us or something, and most of the time our base was like a couple of barges tied together. Until later, then they actually had some huts along the bank. We didn't stay in the huts. If you were on a Tango boat, you lived on the Tango boat for a year. You slept on the Tango boat, and all. You didn't have a hut.
You did a couple missions bringing in Arvin forces. What was your impression of them, of the Arvin forces?
I got to admit, I I didn't trust them. I mean, like I tell somebody, it wasn't like blue and gray uniforms, so we knew who was Southern and who was Northern. I didn't trust them. And then, like getting toward the end of our tour, they wanted us to have Vietnamese on our boat to train them. Um, I didn't want Vietnamese on my boat. And boy, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think I ever had any on my boat. I just I didn't trust them. I mean, because like I said, I didn't know if what side they were actually on. I could never tell, and they had some incidences where they were supposed to be on our side and they weren't. They might kill somebody, but I just never ever trusted them. They did what they were told, and we did what we were told.
And then you had one or two missions with SEALs.
Yeah, just we would just take them and drop them off. And there was a SEAL team down in the Yumen forest, and they were they kind of scared me. They were some tough people, and I think they were trying to prove a point at the time because they were new. SEALs were new. I mean, they had had all kinds of names way back, UDT, Frogmen, you name it. But now the SEALs, they did all of that plus hand-to-hand combat and all, and they were tough guys. And you know, you didn't want them on the wrong side of you. So,
Mm.
but we dropped them off, but maybe just a couple times. Then they got their own boat and they would go out on their own. They would have somebody that would run their boat and drop them off and come back in. But they were around us in the Yumen forest. And then once we left there, I was never around them again.
What I've heard about the SEALs in the Mekong from other Navy guys who are on the rivers is that they would get on the boat, they pretty much keep to themselves. That actually they kept to themselves all the time, kind of men of mystery, and just very much in their own world. Does that fit with your experience?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They had one that was he was firing his weapon, just sighting it in. And I guess the chamber on the weapon blew up and went down and hit him in the foot. Didn't blow his foot off or anything, but wounded him. And I said, I'm going to get a corpsman. And he looked me right in the eyes and said, no, you're not. And it was like, okay. And he goes, you don't tell anybody. Okay. And I turned around and walked off, and he just kind of wrapped his foot up and put his boot on at night and went out. Yeah, they stuck to themselves. They
Yeah.
really did. And only contact I had with them was the couple times we took them out was with their head guys saying, okay, we're dropping off now. We pick up at this time in the morning. Besides that, like I said, they scared me and they did stick to themselves. They were their own entity over here and we were over here. We might have all been Navy, but not the same Navy. That's the way I looked at it. They kept to themselves.
So now you dropped them off. Did you also pick them up?
Yes.
So when you picked them up, could you tell just by, what was going on with them or the amount of ammunition they had with them still that they had, whether or not they had been through something overnight?
Well, you could usually tell just their outlook, but the thing is, that was their job. They would go out there, and their main objective was to just go out and kill people. Just the way it was. We knew that, and we liked them being on our side, but they would go out there just to kill people, and they would come back, you never ask them, and they never talked about it.
Do you have memories of how the Agent Orange was used? I've heard stories of vets who just say, a plane or a helo goes over and then this mist just comes down on them. Do you ever out?
Yep, planes would fly over and just it was like crop dusting. They would spread it around. There were a lot of mornings our boat was kind of slimy from it, so you'd have to throw water on it and kind of take a mop and hit it a little bit. Yeah, it was like a mist. I mean, you might not see it, but it was slimy and all, and it was like 100% of the time in our area.
And was it just one of those things that, well, they're dropping this stuff to get rid of the foliage so that the Viet Cong have fewer places to hide, and that's it? Just, not thinking like, gosh,
Yeah,
I wonder if this is a good idea. I mean, it's tough, isn't it? Because I think in the immediate term, it probably did save lives because it got rid of the foliage and the
yeah,
Viet Cong had fewer places to
right.
hide. But of course, in the long term, you've got all of these consequences that come from it.
Right. And I don't think we even knew what Agent Orange was over there. They had this slimy stuff they've dropped and we didn't know what it was going to do. I had a dog over there that probably saved our tails a few times because
Hmm.
she would hear a lot more in the jungle than we did. And if her ears went up or her tail went back, it was time to pay attention because something was moving out there. And I told somebody she barked once, and I went, "Oh God, they're on the boat," because she didn't bark, but they weren't. It was a sampan going behind us. I got that dog when she was 4 weeks old, so too early, and she made it right to the end with me.
What what did you do with her when it came time for you to leave?
Well, being honest, I was going to take her home. I was going to fly her to Hawaii and pay too much money, and it would have been bad because she wouldn't have dealt well with back here. She was used to it. But we'd just brought a bunch of Cambodian refugees out of Cambodia when we were allowed in there, and this big stream of boats. And being honest, the Cambodians got her and ate her, and because they ate dogs, and they were hungry. And I look at it now that if you're hungry, you'll eat what you got. But at that moment, that was my dog, and I was very upset and wanted to go kill them all. And I did pick up a weapon and start to walk off the dock. And my boat crew grabbed me and said, "You can't do that." And back then, I'm thinking, "Oh yeah, I can." I brought him out of Cambodia. They ate my dog. I can kill him. That was my mindset. But it just happened. But that dog, I still think of that dog every once in a while. When I flew home, it was I got onto a cargo plane to get out of there, and it was me and an Army Ranger, and they gave us jackets. And when I flew to Japan first, and then to Alaska, and then into Washington, um, I flew to Japan on a plane load of dead bodies. And they came and asked me, "Is that okay? Are you okay with that?" And I said, "Well, not my best thing, but I'm alive. Get me out of here." So it was so it was very cold on the plane, and but it was a plane load of dead bodies that I flew to Japan with.
Were they in the
They were in the like the black bags or whatever, they were back toward the back of the plane, and I was up a little, but yeah, a whole plane full of dead bodies. And I said, not the best way, but I was alive. And I do remember the pilot of the plane, big cargo plane. He called me and the ranger up into the cockpit one at a time. And I was amazed at what all they had to read and buttons. And he goes, "That's not it. Look out that windshield." And I did. And he said, "Look down." And I'll never forget him saying, "That is the coastline of Vietnam as you're leaving." And I can still picture it, all the jagged and everything. That's the coastline of Vietnam as you are leaving. And I was thinking, thank you, thank you. Let me get out of here.
How much time did you have in the Navy when your tour in Vietnam was done?
Um, I was done. I came home from Vietnam and then I got out. I had like 3 days that you have to go through all the process and all. And then I flew home.
So how much time would you say there was between the last firefight you experienced and being a civilian? Just guessing.
Probably 2 weeks.
So it's a very short time. You're in Vietnam, you're in the Delta, you come home, about 3 days later, you're a civilian. How did that process go for you? And let me add a little bit to that. You know, talking to vets, sometimes they don't use these exact words, but the idea is, when I got back to the States, there was a feeling that I'm glad that I'm not back in Vietnam, but I don't really feel like I belong here either. And you kind of feel like an alien because you don't want to be back there, but you don't really feel comfortable where you are now. Now, it might be a little bit different for you because you're married and had a child, but how did that reentry go for you?
Mine was definitely different. Well, yeah, like you said, I was married, I had a child. Um, I also had a 10-year-old sister who was 13 plus, a little bit younger than me, and no kids in between us. And I flew in to town at like 2 in the morning. My father brought my wife and baby out there that I got to see for the first time. And then I went directly to my parents' house so my mom could see me. And we sat there till like 4 in the morning or something. And then we were going to go, and my wife had an apartment for us. And they told me I had to be back at my parents' house at 9. And I went, "No, I can't. I'm exhausted. You have to be back at 9." And um, when I was coming back at 9 in the morning, they told me I had to get out at the end of the street and carrying my son. And my 10-year-old sister and her friends on the street had cut up all kinds of paper. They put banners across the street and they threw me a parade.
Oh, wow.
So I was one of the few people that came back from Vietnam to a parade.